How legitimate is buyer's remorse among these Pac-12 schools that are saying we are out of here, and now they're kind of looking around like, oh my gosh, what did we do?
Well, I think it's a legitimate sentiment. Most administrators and athletic departments, most coaches never wanted the Pac-12 to blow up. They don't want to be schlepping across the country to play these games and to compete, but they didn't have a choice. They felt like they didn't have a choice. But how legitimate is the buyer's remorse in terms of like an actionable situation? Not very. I mean, I think that there's a chance that the Pac-12 will reform in a recognizable state, but we're talking about 4, 5, 6, 8 years, right? It's not imminent. Yeah, Washington State, Oregon State are starting next summer are going to compete as a two-team conference
Mm-hmm.
for 2 years. At the end of those 2 years, I think the most likely scenario is they then bring in, a handful of teams from the Mountain West, the best football teams from the Mountain West, and maybe a couple others like a Rice or a Tulane, and they create this 8 or 10 team league that exists for a while. The question then is, at what point would the Stanfords and Cals and the UCLAs and the Arizonas and Utahs, would they ever return? And I think that there's a pretty good chance of that, especially in non-football sports, right? That's really the issue here. Football is its own entity, but how much sense does it make for basketball and soccer and volleyball teams and baseball teams to be
Right.
schlepping back and forth across the country every week? It makes no sense. So I think that in that regard, there's a pretty good chance we will see the Pac-12 rise again in a recognizable fashion by the end of the decade. But I don't know if the football factor will be included in that or if it will be separate.
Okay, who's leading this charge? Is it, and it's not even a charge, it's just below the surface, like whispers in the corner. We're all around the campfire. Pss, 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 pss. And before you know it, it comes around the campfire and it's not even close to being true. So who's leading this, Jon?
Well, it's a great question. And the answer really is Florida State.
Really?
Because Florida State very unhappy in the ACC, and in fact is taking the contract, the ACC's grant of rights contract, to court. And if Florida State wins their court battle and is legally allowed to get out of this long-term contract it has with the ACC, that would start another wave of realignment, and it would create a legal precedent for these schools to get out of their binding agreements. Right now, say, Stanford and Cal are bound to the ACC until 2036. But if that contract is found by the courts to be null and void, they will have flexibility. Same with the schools that are bound to the Big 12 until the early 2030s. Same with every school everywhere. That's the thing people are watching with Florida State. If they succeed, all bets are off with these binding contracts, and you're going to see essentially free agency for schools. Like we have free agency with players in the transfer portal.
Right.
If Florida State wins, there's going to be free agency for schools, and more. There'll be this huge wave of realignment, in 3, 4, 5 years.
So right now, when I talk with fans of college football, they say that the system is broke, that the game is no longer what they once loved. And I think that's just the course of time. Things change, and you have to adapt and adjust to it. I don't see where college football is suddenly going to take a dip from all this realignment, all of this transfer portal, NIL, all that stuff that has just suddenly been heaped on the fan. I'm just talking about the fan, Jon. Here.
Yeah.
Do you sense it as I do? It's like you can say all that all you want, but guess what? Next late August, September, when the games kick off, you're going to find your way to a game. You're going to find your way on a plane. It may not be a plane any longer to Eugene, Oregon. It may be a plane over to somewhere like Cincinnati, who is now in the Big 12. But at the end of the day, all this gnashing of teeth, because the ratings are really good. The game has never been stronger in terms of fan interest, Jon.
That's right. You hit it spot on. The ratings were fantastic this season. And guess what? the 12-team playoff that starts next year is going to boost the ratings even further because more teams are going to be playing meaningful games in October and November because instead of 4 spots, there's going to be 12 spots, right? So I think that the playoff is going to transform the sport in a lot of ways we haven't really considered. But one of them is going to be adding interest to TV ratings that are already fantastic. So now an Arizona State fan, whereas they were willing to go, watch the Sun Devils in LA, I don't know that they're going to want to go to Orlando or Cincinnati, but they'll tune in. They'll tune in, and the TV dollars are driving it all, right? That's the other piece. The schools are chasing the TV money because that's the biggest revenue pot out there. And if people keep watching, the TV ratings are going to remain strong, and the networks are going to continue to be willing to pay for college football. And the chase for the dollars is going to continue with the TV networks leading the way.
Okay, well, you're leaving out a very important part, and so did I on this: gambling dollars. Gambling dollars have really transformed this. And when I started this company back in 2011, we were doing a weekly gambling show. Jimmy Vaccaro, wisest of the wise guys in Vegas. I've known Jimmy 35 years. Every week he'd come on 2011. It was, ooh, Brad's doing gambling. Really, really. No, you could see it coming. I don't think that it's even hit its crescendo yet. I'm worried about underage gambling because I know a lot of kids that have an app that mom and dad are feeling like that's really dangerous. We haven't seen the scandal hit yet in college sports like I think it's gonna at some point. We've had a few programs that have suspended mass players, but we haven't had something major, Jon, happen yet. So where's gambling fit in all this?
Well, gambling is part of the reason that people are watching the games. And so gambling is kind of baked in to the ratings and the advertising dollars that the TV networks are reaping, right? So, and that translates to more money in the system. And you're right, it hasn't reached a crescendo because it's not legal in California yet. Eventually, it's going to be legal in California, and you're going to have, all the college football fans out on the West Coast and all the gamblers on the West Coast are going to have their mobile phones, and they're going to be, making live bets on games. And that's going to increase ratings and interest even more. The convergence of sports wagering with technological advancements, with our innate passion for football, is going to just continue to drive this whole thing into the next decade. And college football will chase the dollars because the schools don't have a choice. They need the money to support all their programs, right? Most of the programs lose money, so they have to chase the dollars. And we're going to continue to see this.
I'll let you go off that. I appreciate your time and insight as always, Jon. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Brad.